It's the SNL Hall of Fame podcast with your host, Jamie Dew, Chief Librarian Thomas Senna, and featuring Matt Ardill. And now, curator of the hall, Jamie Dew.
All right. Thank you so much, Doug Nance. It is great to be back with you all once again in the hallowed halls here at the SNL Hall of Fame. My name is JD, and it's my pleasure to welcome you inside. But before doing so, reminding you to please wipe your feet. We keep this place spick and span. The SNL Hall of Fame podcast is a weekly affair where each episode we take a deep dive into the career of a former cast member, host, musical guest, or writer, and we add them to the ballot for your consideration. Once the nominees have been announced, we turn to you, the listener, to vote for the most deserving and help determine who will be enshrined for perpetuity in the hall. That's right. This is a forever game. We do this forever. We are joined by a first-time guest today. It's going to be pretty thrilling to listen to Thomas in conversation with Nicole Brady, who is a morning news anchor out of Denver for the ABC affiliate. We're thrilled to have her here, and we're also thrilled to be joined by our friend Matt Ardill to talk about Anna Gasteier.
Hey, Jamie, thanks. I am really excited. Love this performer. One of my favorite sketches is by her.
Really?
Probably can't guess which.
I'm not even going to try.
That's right. Sweaty balls. I mean,
I should have guessed.
Who doesn't love a good sweaty ball?
Right.
They're salty and very, very glistening.
Good God, man.
Okay, I will stop with that. But yeah, so Ana Gasteyer, height 5'5", born May 4th, 1967. She was a political brat. She was born in Washington, D.C. To her mom, an artist, and her dad was a political lobbyist who later went on to become the mayor of New Mexico City, of Corrales. She grew up on Capitol Hill, and one of her friends growing up was Jimmy Carter's daughter, Amy. Yeah, for much of her childhood, she actually wore an eye patch, and she has said that she believes that influenced her to become a comedian because all of our growing up as a kid with a health thing, a lot of the times that's how we react to it. I know I did. That's why how I dealt with my epilepsy. Now she later attended Northwestern University as a music major and graduated from Northwestern University of Communications with a bachelor in speech, theater, and performance studies. While at Northwestern, she was part of Paul Warshauer's improv comedy Meow before going on to join the Groundlings. Before getting into acting, she worked as a temp, a switchboard operator, and a hostess, like many people having to toil away in those really crummy jobs before hitting their big break. She is a trained violinist and a singer who draws heavily from jazz influences. Yeah, she even has recorded a Christmas album called Sugar and Booze, because let's be honest, that is the core of Christmas. The joy of man and sugar and booze. So I'm going to retake that. She's a trained violinist and a singer, drawing heavily from jazz influences. In fact, she has even recorded a Christmas album called Sugar and Booze, because what says Christmas more than sugar and booze and, family strife? She has 86 acting roles, 3 producer roles, and 2 writing roles. She's a former groundling who performed in small roles in Seinfeld, Party of Five, Frasier, and many more roles as a working actor. Her first acting role was actually, talk about starting at the top. She was a patron of a soup restaurant on the show Seinfeld. After leaving SNL, she actually found success on Broadway and has had starring roles in Wicked and the Three Penny Opera, as well as a voice actor on shows including Bob's Burgers. She's also published a cookbook called Cooking with Ana Gasteier, Recipes and Delicious Dishes Celebrating the Season. That really sounds like something that would come in a sweaty ball sack. Now, she said her favorite spices are cinnamon and smoked paprika. And as a philanthropist, she has done work to support Broadway Cares, Equity Fights AIDS, and helped support Planned Parenthood.
Yes, JD, Matt, that was awesome. Thank you so much. Today we are talking about a wonderful cast member from the late 90s and early 2000s. And my guest today, I have the honor of welcoming my favorite news anchor in the United States, my friend, someone who's witnessed me do hours of karaoke in a whole lifetime ago. I want to welcome Nicole Brady to the podcast. Nicole, how are you?
I'm great, Tom. Thank you. You are my favorite radio/podcast broadcaster of all time.
Oh my gosh.
From the days when we used to toss to you for traffic in Albuquerque.
Yes.
And now moving up, doing way more fun things, I guess, getting to talk about Saturday Night Live.
Oh, I love talking SNL. I love doing traffic too. Back in the day, in the mid 2000s, Nicole was a news anchor in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and I did traffic for a radio station. So I would do traffic for the TV station, and we had a lot of fun times. As much fun as you could have at 6 a.m. talking about the traffic on television. But it was a great time. I love those days.
Yes, it was. It's crazy to think how long it's been. Sometimes it seems like a different lifetime ago, like you said. And then we're both still involved in it, though. And I know you were always really into broadcasting and comedy, and so was I. And so I'm glad we're both still talking about this stuff.
Yeah, this is wonderful. It's all coming together. You have to remind me, what was your go-to song when we would go do karaoke?
Ooh, great question. Did I have a go-to? God, my husband, as you remember, certainly would have had.
He brought the house down.
His go-tos. What do I like? I don't know. Gosh, Tom, you put me on the spot. I was all prepared to talk about SNL and not my own karaoke history.
Well, I did Marvin Gaye. I think you had the privilege of watching me do like Marvin Gaye and probably Careless Whisper, a Total Eclipse of the Heart. Maybe I have a memory of that. So.
Yes. Those are good ones. Yes. No, my husband used to like to do "I'm Just a Gigolo." I don't know if you remember that one.
Yep, that's right.
He always liked that. We
did a good David Lee Roth.
Yeah. The David Lee Roth version. Yes. And we would do some duets. I think sometimes we used to like to do the Pogues' "Fairy Tale of New York."
Yeah, deep cut for karaoke. I think people appreciated that.
So gotta get. I have not been in a publicly performed karaoke in a while now. We've done some at home, but we got kids; they are getting into it.
I think I'm retired as well. I don't want to. My wife hasn't seen that side of me, so I don't want to embarrass her too much out in public.
Yes, it was before we were recording every moment of our lives all the time. So sometimes that's a good thing.
Exactly. And so I know you're a big comedy fan. We talked a lot of comedy in the past, and I want to know what's your history with watching Saturday Night Live?
I started watching Saturday Night Live in 1992 when I was about 12, and I know that because it was the election year. And so it was when Dana Carvey was doing George Bush and Ross Perot, and Phil Hartman was doing Bill Clinton. And they would have their debates on TV. And my parents were fans of SNL. And I guess that was the year they just felt I was old enough and would let me stay up to watch it. But I specifically remember it being that year because of the election. So sometime around that 92 season, I would have started watching it and just loved it. Never missed it ever since. As a child, at least through the 90s, I would never miss it. From there on, I remember that season would have been, like we said, Dana Carvey and Wayne's World and Mike Myers, and Phil Hartman was still on, and I think Adam Sandler and Chris Farley and David Spade and those guys were getting in there in those years. So those are kind of some of my favorite years. And then of course I think at some point in the 90s you could probably start watching all the old episodes on Comedy Central when that came out. So then I went back and watched, the old ones from the 80s and 70s and have pretty much watched it ever since. But the 90s, I was so excited when you told me that I would get to talk about Ana Gasteyer, because that was like the time that, such an impressionable time in life. And those were always my favorites.
Yeah, people around, we're about the same age, and people around our general age range. Yeah, those were our cast, the Dana Carvey, Mike Myers, Phil Hartman, Comedy Central and VH1 used to show reruns. It was both of them. Yeah, so we were lucky enough to be able to go back and watch from the 70s and on those two networks. That was great. We have kind of similar experiences, like I said, as a lot of people in our general age range do. And I believe you've done a little sketch and improv. I seem to remember going to watch you in Albuquerque do a little bit.
Yes, another thing that so I've retired from that, but yes,
okay.
We did. Brian, my husband, and I took improv classes in Albuquerque together, and then performed a little bit. Yeah, it was not the best, but I always appreciate it.
I had fun watching
some of those guys, some of the people we worked with were awesome and hilarious, and they still perform in Albuquerque at the Box Theater. So for your listeners there, they're amazing and awesome. And so we continue to go watch them a lot. But we have since sort of retired from that. But of course, I always really appreciated the difficulty of improv or sketch comedy and how difficult it is to make it funny. So I've always loved, whenever we've gone to New York, Chicago, LA, we go to the improv clubs, we go to the Ground League, Second City, where most of the SNL casts have come from. I mean, we love all that stuff.
Yeah, as someone who's dipped your toe in that, try to put it in perspective. Like, what does it take to make sketches work at such a high level like Ana did and other SNL performers did? Like, what all goes into that from your perspective?
That's a great question for from my limited perspective on that. I always love it when I watch an SNL sketch that I can feel was something that someone just sort of improvised or came up with, and then they just ran with it. And sometimes I feel like the best sketches are the ones that are kind of goofy. They don't really seem grounded in anything topical or like an idea that someone wrote down on paper, but rather more of just sort of someone just getting up there and acting, and maybe it started as a sketch they were trying, but it ran with something and went some other direction. And I feel like, I'm sure that has to happen all the time, I'm sure. So the writers are obviously extremely important to the show. But I also think that sometimes just those characters and those actors can probably just take some of those sketches and in different directions. And so both are really important. I mean, I think writing good comedy is way more difficult than I would even know, because that timing, it's just so hard to nail. And I mean, I think we all know there are some really awful SNL sketches in the history of the show that just
absolutely.
do not
That's the
work.
Fun of being an SNL fan, though. I think a lot of times is seeing the bad ones, because there's plenty.
Exactly.
It's hard. Yeah.
But then there are brilliant ones that stay with us forever. So
I don't know if you're like me. Like, I always like the ones at the end of the show, like the 10-1 sketches. Just the oddball, let's try this out and see if it sticks. Those are always like a lot of my go-to SNL sketches.
I
were
love
the weirdo
those.
ones.
Sometimes those were the best in the whole episode, because they were just like the end of the show, almost got cut probably. Sometimes those are the gems.
Yeah, definitely. So our topic today is Anna Gasteier. She was on the show from 1996 to 2002. That was an era that immediately followed a time when the show was actually in genuine trouble. Season 20, the show was in trouble. They always use the headline like Saturday Night Dead, but this is a time when that was almost going to come true. I think the humor, Nicole, was a little more crass, maybe not as clever before Anna got there. Anna got there in season 22, so maybe a season before Anna got there, they were starting to whip themselves into shape a little bit. But it was honestly like very much a boys' club at SNL around that time. And she's often grouped with Sherry O'Terry and Molly Shannon for good reason. They were great. So, I mean, how cool was it from your perspective to be able to see like such talented women help to get the show back on good footing?
Yeah, that's a great question, and something I thought about a lot preparing for this. I don't know that I would have appreciated it as much as a teenager watching it, but now looking back over even more time, I mean, wow. So by the time Anna Gasteyer was on the show, it had already been on for over 20 years. It's been even longer now since she was a cast member on that, or just as long. And so when you look over all that history now, you can still really only point to, I mean, such a small group of women versus the group of men who would have gained fame and be household names from that show. And there are a lot more women now. But she was really, like you said, Ana Gasteyer, Sherry O'Terry, Molly Shannon were kind of the first ones in the 90s. They had, really only a few before that I think I even looked through the history, and there was one season where I think Julia Sweeney was the only main player, right, and not a featured player, but one of the main cast members. She's the only woman. And there were always women in there, featured players, things like that. But just to kind of go from those, like you said, that boys club of maybe Adam Sandler, David Spade, Chris Farley, those guys who were kind of, taking the show in a different direction, like you said, to this newer era of really, really great actors and tight sketches and characters and more equal balance between the actors, more of an ensemble, I guess you'd say. That was pretty cool, and it's definitely noticeable now if you were to go back and look through those years again, how remarkable that change was from kind of the guys who wanted to be the funniest person, Adam Sandler, Chris Farley, David Spade. They were stand-ups. They were hilarious. I mean, I loved those years. Don't get me wrong. But then you get into the years where it's not the people, but it's the sketches that you remember. It's the delicious dish, the NPR sketch with Ana Gasteyer, or the cheerleaders, or Molly Shannon as Mary Catherine Gallagher. Yes. So you have those years that come in, and it's more about these sketches. And Will Ferrell, as brilliant and amazing and as he is, I think I've read other people say this too. I mean, it was all about the sketch partner there too, and he always made whoever he was with look amazing too. And so it was never really about him being this standout star from that era. Even though in hindsight he was absolutely one of the most brilliant stars to ever come from the show. But everyone looked good during those years. And I think the women, it was really the first time in a long time you'd seen fully female-led sketches in some of those instances that I mentioned with the NPR ladies there, or some of Ana Gasteyer's characters that we'll talk about more when she did The View, with where she would play different characters on that, and Sherry O'Terry was Barbara Walters, and so you really started to see a lot more women-led sketches during that time.
Yeah, that was such a pivotal point as far as that goes. We had Jan Hooks. She was probably the most memorable a few years before them, but even she, like that perspective, she wasn't always able to, or maybe allowed, I don't know, but she didn't always give the perspective quite like Anna and Sherry and Molly did. Jan Hooks served different roles in a lot of sketches. A good example, I think, of like that trio and that dynamic to me was there was a sketch from October of '98. The three of them played hosts on MSNBC. They were discussing the Hillary and Bill Clinton's marriage, and it went from like a semi-serious news program to a slumber party.
Do you think Hillary Clinton is pretty?
Oh, she is definitely pretty.
Oh, come on, that left-wing feminist prop propaganda. She's not that cute.
She has a very pretty face.
Sharon.
Well, not to sound like the president or anything, but it really depends on how you define pretty. I mean, she's not like model pretty, but like on a scale of 1 to 10, if 1 was like the Crypt Keeper and 10 was like Jennifer Love Hewitt, I'd say she's like like a 6 or a 7.
Oh, come on.
Yeah, I think Hillary's the kind of pretty where, like, if you didn't know her, she wouldn't catch your eye, but if she was your friend, you'd be like, oh, she's totally pretty,
Something like that you might see in the late 70s with Gilda and Jane and Lorraine Newman. But something like that, we hadn't seen something like that in a long time. Lucy Lawless was playing a legal expert who got in on the fun. So just to see that perspective of like, we're serious news people. Now it's a slumber party because that's, that was commentary on how the Clinton scandal was being covered around that time. That was just such a great example to me of that perspective and how the three of them played really well together.
I loved revisiting some of the commentary on Bill Clinton that they had during that time. That was fun.
So we could get into some of those sketches and characters.
Yeah.
So what's like maybe one of the first ones that comes to your mind when you're thinking of Anna Gasteier?
A couple. I mean, one of the first ones that comes to mind is I loved Delicious Dish, NPR. They nailed that so well. And I remember, because I would drive to school at that time, so I do remember listening to NPR, and they were so spot on with how those hosts talked.
Now, Terry, the days are getting longer, and the mercury is rising.
It sure is, Margaret Jo, and that can only mean one thing. Summer.
Now, one of my favorite things about summer is that you can have your meals outside.
That is neat.
Yeah, it's fun. Because it's warm. It's warm outside.
Yeah. Summer's my favorite season.
Same here, because it's hotter than the rest of the year.
Yeah, it sure is.
Yeah, it's neat, isn't it? It's fun.
It's neat.
Yeah, it's neat. It's
good times.
Yeah, it's good.
Compared to how most of us listen to the radio and the shock jocks and whoever that you listen to the radio, back then and still today to some extent, I don't really.
I was part of a morning zoo myself, of a little bit on KOB-FM. I was kind of like a part of something like that.
Exactly. You have that style, and then so NPR was just so different, and they just nailed that. And even they were so funny with their soft spoken and their comments to each other, and just it's hilarious. They just were so spot on, and then of course they had just the funniest topics and guests. I mean, the sweaty balls with Alec Baldwin is a Christmas classic.
Tell us about your balls, Pete.
Well, over at Seasons Eatings, we have balls for every taste. Popcorn balls, cheese balls, rum balls, you name it.
Wow. My mouth's watering just thinking about those balls.
It's been years since I've seen any balls.
Would you like to see my balls now?
Yeah. Whip them out.
Whip them, babe.
That just is one of those that's in pop culture now. That's, if you say that term, people know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Usually. And then they, I rewatched an episode with John Goodman on there that cracked me up. So the guests that they would get on, what they would get the host to do in there. So funny. So I loved that one.
Something about the Delicious Dish, what really stood out to me was just how it takes a lot of confidence to do something so quiet, to do material that quiet. Like, it was very quiet, understated, even before all the innuendo would start. Like with the sweaty balls, Alec Baldwin didn't get on screen for like 2.5 minutes. And sometimes that's an entire sketch. So Anna and Molly Shannon had to carry the sketch with an understated, quiet kind of tone. And that takes a lot of skill. That takes a lot of confidence in the material and the performance to not shout something from the rooftops like that. Does that make sense?
I 100% agree. I mean, when you watch those again, you realize how it doesn't come out, and it is slow. They're longer sketches. And I don't know what the average time for sketches, if it has grown shorter or longer or whatever over time, but But just to let something just kind of settle in like that and rely on the characters, I mean, that must have been a lot of trust that the producers, that Lorne Michaels had in those actors, because I mean they were beloved. I mean, people loved SNL at that time for Molly Shannon and Sherry O'Terry and Ana Gasteyer. I mean, the women were a huge part of the show's success at the time, and so I think they hit on something at that time where just being funny and kind of doing pop culture references and things like that really just worked at the time.
Yeah, and even though the material is quiet, like what stood out to me too about watching Anna perform, a little subtle thing, I guess, that it made the sketch work, is she doesn't play it as bored. Even though the material is quiet, you never think that she's bored talking in the sketch. Like her facial expression is key. Like she knew the right tone to carry. She always has like a smile, like an excited smile on her face, even though her delivery is very dry.
I don't know if you know this, but there are a lot of different kinds of ice.
Yeah. You're absolutely right. There's cubed ice.
Crushed ice.
Cracked ice.
Shaved ice.
Shaved ice. I didn't know ice could grow a beard.
That's funny. Did you just think of that right now?
No, I thought of it last night and wrote it down.
If she broke in these sketches, they would die. Like they wouldn't work. Like there's some sketches where it's fun to see them break. Something like this, It would just totally ruin all the comedy. So that's something about Anna's performance that just struck me rewatching these, was just she carried the perfect tone.
I don't know that she ever broke that I remember seeing. I mean, I don't know that group really was known for that. But I mean, they took it seriously to the extent that, I mean, it was hilarious. They were zany and wild and out there, but in the performance of it, it was all business there, and just great acting and comedic timing and really getting into those characters. I mean, it's fun because I just can't even picture Ana Gasteyer ever breaking up or laughing during a sketch. And
no, not really. That was Jimmy Fallon's department in Horatio.
That started a lot with Jimmy Fallon for sure.
Yeah.
But no one was going to be the one who's throwing it off, kind of, in those cases. And so, yeah, you're right. Like that would have just to laugh or to throw something else in would have thrown off that sketch. But
these delicious dish sketches were just classic. Good times, Nicole.
Good times.
So delicious dish, awesome. What's another one that you were going to mention?
So, of course, so much of Ana Gasteyer is like a duo, obviously. So pairing her with Will Ferrell for The Culps.
When life's little emergencies come at you,
try a little CPR, cardiopulmonary resuscitation. 1, 2, 3, 4. Here in my car, I feel safest of all. I can lock all my doors. It's the only way to live in cars. In cars.
I mean, that was when I was in school still. And so you had the Bobby Culp and Bobby and Marty Culp coming on and doing school assemblies, playing these ridiculous songs, committing to it fully. That's kind of what I meant to say earlier, is they just committed so fully that's really what I meant when I say serious. They were just so committed to those characters. And it was hysterical. I loved those sketches when they would come on. And I think some of it was being a high school student at the time.
Yeah.
And being able to relate to these ridiculous adults coming on stage to talk about drugs or things and singing these ridiculous songs. I think Ana Gasteyer actually has a very nice voice in real life.
She's a great singer.
Yeah.
She's a trained singer. I think she did Wicked, and she's done like musicals on stage.
Yeah,
and she's very, very good. And I think the sketches partly worked because she's such a good singer.
Probably
like hitting,
you can, exactly. It's not horrible to listen to by any means. It's just hilarious. It's just funny because they're just so out there and wild. And I love that one because with both Ana Gasteyer and Will Ferrell, I just feel like they work together so well. They might have played off each other so well. Again, I imagine there was probably some improv in a lot of the rehearsals for those.
Yeah, I think so. The two of them and Paul Appel helped them write this. So I think the three of them did a lot of improv there at the office. And yeah, what a fun sketch. I used to perk up, like when these would come on, I just always wondered what songs they would sing during the medley. Like, yeah, what are we going to get? A lot of the times it was it was a hip hop song with subjective lyrics, Baby Got Back, something like that, which I think was one of our karaoke songs, to be honest with you. So it kind of fits, but
yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah, exactly. Those great 90s songs. That was amazing. I loved her as Martha Stewart and Celine Dion. So we can talk about both of those. I mean, so obviously we talked about some pairings that she had as a solo kind of performer. Obviously, Ana Gasteyer could hold a whole sketch on her own. I recently was reading in getting ready for this that I just Googled Ana Gasteyer, Martha Stewart, hoping to find a clip, and of course I did. But I was reading that she credited the topless Martha Stewart Thanksgiving clip with preserving her job there. She said in an interview that was when she knew she wouldn't get fired from the show because it just was such a hit. And it was. That has come up in a lot of the holiday specials, of course, over the years. So it's one of the sketches that I'm a little more familiar with of her Martha Stewart impressions. And it cracks me up every time.
Hi there, I'm Martha Stewart. It's my favorite time of year. Sleigh ride, caroling, and wassail. These are just some of the things that remind us all of Christmas.
She's so deadpan in a way and dry, like you said, similar to some of her other characters, but just hilarious. With just a black bar over her top there. And the whole thing, it's just so brave. And she's just, really out there bearing all on her own out there. But Martha Stewart was brilliant. Again, kind of like NPR, it just nailed the absurdity of her in some ways of that character of having this homemaker like that on TV kind of. And so that I just always loved Martha Stewart.
Around that time, Martha Stewart, that was before she went to prison.
Yes.
So she was just thought it's just kind of cookie cutter, no pun intended, boring kind of lady on TV. So that's where a lot of the comedy came in. And then afterwards, she has a little more, she's best friends with Snoop Dogg now, and she's been in jail. But back then in 1997 or 98, she had just this square, dry persona. So it was even funnier back then. Everybody saw Martha Stewart topless with a black bar covering her, and it was like such a opposite of how we viewed Martha Stewart.
Oh yeah, scandalous kind of. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And that shoulder shimmy at the end that she does, just like the perfect like capper to that sketch. It was wonderful. She had two other really good ones that I liked, like. If anybody hasn't seen these, go look them up. It's a St. Patrick's Day sketch when she played Martha Stewart. It was like a little edgier persona again in that St. Patrick's Day sketch. It's kind of played against type as far as what we know about Martha Stewart, kind of revealed a sort of dark personality underneath all of that. There's a Halloween sketch that's really funny. She's giving tips on pranks.
Toilet paper has become a staple of the Halloween prankster's toolkit. I'll show you how to design, plan, and implement a TP job that is both visually stunning and full of mischievous good cheer. This is what I did to my ex-husband's house. The egg has been the weapon of choice for Halloween revelers for hundreds of years, chosen for its sticky texture and its lingering sulfurous smell. Eggs are a great way to make a lasting impression. A robin's egg splatters in a prism of harvest colors.
And apparently it has to do with, like, she mentions her ex-husband, and there's a lot of like funny bitterness, something unhinged underneath the surface that Anna does a good job, I think, of letting out in small bits. I think to me too, Nicole, when I see really good comedic actors, like Phil Hartman used to do this really well, is where he would play it straight and have a straight delivery, but you can tell there was something really unhinged below the surface. Is like that's something that you've noticed with some sketch performers.
Yes, I think you're right. They are not letting on how ridiculous this could get, I think, in some ways. I think you're right. That in the Martha Stewart example, exactly. She's committed to playing it so straight. And of course, when in Saturday Night Live, when they bring back characters, as they do over the years, we've seen so many recurring characters. So you have to push it a little further each time and make it a little different each time. And so I think in those later sketches, when it got darker or just sillier, you still have to stay fully committed to the to just kind of the seriousness of the character, and it just makes it funnier. So I certainly think that that's true, especially of those recurring characters on the show.
Yeah. A character that she was played really big though, and we were going to talk about was Celine Dion.
Yes.
So
which I love. Yeah. I loved her as Celine Dion because that was when Titanic came out, and that song My Heart Will Go On was everywhere, and you could not escape it. And she was, and so Celine, people had a love-hate relationship with Celine Dion, and she was hilarious. I mean, the accent wasn't exactly spot on, but it was just hilarious.
You look beautiful, and I can't believe your album had sold 10 million copies.
Actually, it was only 3 million.
Oh, that's right. My album had sold 10 million copies. I'm sorry. Would you do the honor of singing me one of your hit songs?
I would be happy to.
Hey, what about me? Oh, I'm so sorry, Shayna. Would you do me the honor of listening to Mariah sing?
Total caricature in that case, and just probably one of the bigger, like you said, more zany roles that she did was Celine Dion, and just, I am the best singer in the whole world. I mean, she just made it bigger and better, and I always loved it when she would do that one.
Something I love about impressions, you may agree, is to me it's not enough to sound like the person exactly. That's fine. It's more of like a parlor trick or something to sound exactly like someone. There needs to be a viewpoint, a take about that person. And I think this Ana Gasteyer had one here with Celine Dion, the bragging about herself, often in like a passive-aggressive sort of way, liking the spotlight on her, pushing Mariah Carey, played by Sherry O'Terry, away from her. I think Ana really found a take on Celine Dion, and not just here's an impression of Celine Dion.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. That's such a great point about impressions. Because it is impressive when someone can do a really spot on voice. And I could watch the greats, Dana Carvey, do impressions all day. Not that he doesn't also do a take. I mean, he does, but some of the funnier ones are the ones that are not, they don't necessarily look like the person exactly. They're not dead on, but they just take it and run with it. And yeah, she definitely hit on that sort of love-hate relationship that we had with Celine Dion.
Yeah, you had to be there in the 90s to get that full, like, Celine Dion everywhere, as you mentioned.
Yes.
It was just in our faces all the time. I don't know if you had a chance to rewatch any of the Cinder Calhoun sketches. That was an interesting one, the Lilith Fair stand-up comedian.
Yeah, so when did you discover that you were funny, Cinder?
Actually, it's a funny story. I was backstage with Tracy Chapman at the Random Acts of Kindness tour a couple years back, and she was kind of down, sort of in an emotional K-hole of sorts, and I really wanted to lift her spirits, so we decided to, just take a ride down to the juice tent, and so we get in her car, and I just turned to her and said, "You got a fast car." We We practically peed our pants. We were laughing so hard.
That was not one that I knew her as well for.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was kind of fun. I watched the one she did with Sarah McLachlan. And, but again, it was very 90s, during that, that era of female musicians, Lilith Fair. It takes you back to those years, definitely, with like, Lisa Loeb and the style of so many of those 90s singers, that was really fun, to reminisce about.
Yeah, her pronunciation of like Latino and Latina,
Yes.
just like the real kind of try hard
Yes,
sort of thing that we saw in the 90s. That Sarah McLachlan one, it's like a Thanksgiving song. It's like a, I don't know, semi-Thanksgiving classic on SNL, Basted in Blood.
Yes.
So set your tables, America, from Birmingham to Branson. But when you carve that turkey, you're a finger-licking Charlie Manson. Enjoy your pumpkin pie, your buttery Idaho spud, grandma's chestnut stuffing, and a turkey basted in blood, basted in blood, basted in blood, basted in blood. Enjoy your turkey, enjoy it now, basted in blood.
Yeah, such a good take on that type of person.
Yeah, that political stance that was popular, and
Yeah.
exactly. It was very true to the time.
Did you get a chance to watch the sketch that I sent you for a specific reason? It was the
I
9
did.
News Morning Edition one.
Yes, I did.
All right, so this was one where it was in season 27. Anna Gasteier was in, and she plays a news anchor along with Will Ferrell, and some stuff goes wrong in the studio. So I'm curious, like watching this sketch as a news anchor, how would you handle some of this stuff? So like one of the things is at first they start with no chairs. So
Yeah.
they're just like super
They're
short
way
behind
short,
the news
yeah.
desk. Like what would happen if you just showed up to work and there's like no chair behind the desk?
So I don't know. I don't know that we often show up with no chairs, but they're all over the place. Different people sit in them, so they're down really low or they're up really high. I mean, we definitely have that problem where you can't adjust it, and so we're there trying to bounce on the chair to get it to go down because it's been raised
Yeah.
all the way up.
Someone's doing a
or
countdown
something.
for you. You have like 5 seconds and you're still
Yeah,
trying
and
to
I'm
adjust
just
your
sitting
chair.
there like trying to get my chair down. Honestly, this is not a story that would entertain, I'm sure, most of your listeners, but we have had the biggest battle over chairs in the newsroom I'm currently in that I won't even get into it. It became a thing where we were on the mornings, we kept seeing these emails back and forth between some of the talent in the daytime and the chairs, complaining about the chairs, and the guy who's in charge of the chairs working to get better chairs. And we just laughed like, what is the problem? Just get us some chairs that
It's
work.
like it's becoming a currency or something. Yeah.
Yeah, it really is ridiculous. Some of the things that are so true to a real newsroom whenever SNL has made fun of news, and I love when they make fun of news, of course. They are dead on with so much of it. I mean, so much is kind of a cliche that the anchors have egos and what's going on when you're not supposed to be on camera, when you think you're not on camera,
Yeah.
but the camera pops up. And so in that when you sent me the 9 News morning show, it's just like that. It's like people who are trying to be really friendly because it's a morning show, as you were part of a morning show, you know how it is.
Yeah.
And you're trying to just kind of keep things happy, and then things are going wrong, like the tape goes wrong, and you have to think that's kind of some of the origins of Ron Burgundy with Will Ferrell in
Yeah,
that
that's
sketch.
a good point. Wow.
Yeah.
I didn't even think of that. That's probably a really good point.
I mean, I've heard he based it on an actual old anchor in somewhere where he lived growing up, and I'm sure there were many inspirations, but you start to see in those old 90 news sketches that hint of Will Ferrell, that arrogance, and
There was that wake up and smile where it basically turned into Lord of the Flies because the
Yes.
teleprompter went out.
Exactly. The the tape guy's not there. They keep playing the wrong tape.
Yeah.
They show Will Ferrell like picking his nose in one spot. I mean, I've been caught on camera where you think it's supposed to go to the other guy and it comes to you. And I think I've never been caught picking my nose.
Eating a sandwich?
God.
Anna Gasteier eats a sandwich when she's off camera. Have you ever eaten a sandwich, Nicole?
So yes, I have been caught with food in my mouth. So not too many times, but I've been caught with having taken a bite of something and it comes back to you sooner than you thought. And I think the last time it happened to me, so a few years ago, but it wasn't like gum or something where I could just kind of spit it out real quick. I just had to finish chewing it.
This is great. You're going to go viral one of these days.
I know. I guess sometimes I wonder if they don't go, if no one's calling and complaining, does that mean no one's really watching? Because I'm sure no one really needed to see me finish chewing. And
That's hilarious.
But no, that all of that stuff really, really happens, and in the real world, you roll with it and you don't necessarily comment on it. I love, in that particular one you sent me, someone has written lines into Ana Gasteyer's copy that she's reading that are just ridiculous.
The world's oceans may hold the secret to curing breast cancer. Recent studies at Johns Hopkins University have shown that plankton holds a certain enzyme that makes booby cancer go bye-bye. So bye-bye booby cancer. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Some very unprofessional writing once again. It just snuck right by me. I would never say booby cancer.
We are indeed having a rough time here.
It's like a child wrote the copy.
Yes. And she says like, what? I wouldn't say, no, I don't know who wrote this. I wouldn't say that. And so they play up the egos. I mean, obviously I would like to think most of us real news anchors read our stuff beforehand and would catch anything like that. And some of those would never happen to us, but they love to play up that the anchors are just really people who are there reading a teleprompter and anything that comes up on it. There's
also a stray dog in the studio.
And the stray dog.
What would you do if there was a stray dog that just walked into your shot?
Well, there was. It's Steve Stucker in Albuquerque did have his dogs at the studio.
Right. Did one of them ever go loose? Did you have any problems with those dogs in studio?
We had, so a few that I remember, one time, those dogs, Steve was a dog trainer as well and had his dogs really well trained. But one time, maybe it was a newer one, pooped in front of the news director's office, right in front of her office, like he knew. And she banned dogs for like the rest of the summer. She said we were going to have the dog days of summer or the no dog days of summer. And Steve's dogs, who are always there on Fridays, were banned. Of course, in the end, he won, and they came back, and people loved the dogs.
Absolutely.
But no, they would run. Yeah, they would. Mostly, they were good dogs, but they would sleep. They would just kind of lay down anywhere in the studio. So you'd be walking over to do another shot at another camera, and you're stepping over one of them. I don't remember all their names, but yeah, they were well behaved. But Steve would get some other animals and groups to bring on animals sometimes. And I remember a bird that someone brought on once that would not stop squawking. And it was doing it while we had gone on to the serious news.
Oh my gosh.
And this bird is still squawking. I think I might have that on tape somewhere, but it was that was an SNL moment. That was a true, there is a bird squawking through our newscast right now, and you would have to see it to believe it. And I just, so I'll have to go dig up some old stuff and see if I can share some of that. We've gotten old enough now where we can start to share our old stuff, and it's funny now, and it's not.
Exactly.
At the time, I remember I was still pretty young. I thought it was horrible. I just couldn't believe our serious newscast was being disrupted by this bird. But now I think I would just laugh.
It's funny. I love news hijinks, and I think SNL captures it so well. Anna was really great in this sketch, how she handled all the disturbances in the studio. So again, season 27, that was episode 12. Everybody should go check that out. Were there any other performances or anything like that we kind of glossed over? And Nicole, as far as Anna Gasteier goes?
I actually had never seen this one live, but I watched her do Dr. Laura. And that was a really funny one that comes up in her best of series that you can watch on YouTube.
Cedric, hello.
Oh, hi, Dr. Laura. I just want to say that I'm honored to talk to you.
Mm-hmm.
And, well, I'm my kid's dad.
Appreciate it. Don't have time for it. What's your question?
Oh, well, my new wife's parents...
New wife. New wife. What happened to the old wife, huh? Do we just sort of trade her in for a new model, which started making a knocking sound?
Well, actually, she died. But my new in-laws are
Well, I guess we're only concerned with the new wife's parents. I guess when old wifey died, the rest of her family just went down with the ship. What's your question?
I was wondering if I
No. Wonder is a brand of bread. Don't wonder. Ask.
My mother-in-law was actually a big Dr. Laura fan, so I'm pretty familiar with Dr. Laura and her style of advice over the radio. And she was just hilarious, just so mean to the callers. And I thought, wow, that was great. I mean, just again, just taking a current figure in the media and in pop culture that some people would have been, I wouldn't have probably been aware of her back then. So that's probably why I kind of missed the sketch. But nowadays that just really, that had me cracking up. And then, so yeah, that's another thing. Some of these, are funnier on rewatch because now you really process the kind of the people in the news of the time and the characters. I mean, like I was saying, I really thought it was hilarious watching The View again, and what they said about the Bill Clinton situation with Monica Lewinsky and those things. So Ana Gasteyer, I saw she played Joy Behar on The View. She also would play a guest star at times. And so that was really funny. And again, just all female driven. It's the women of the show just carrying the biggest kind of stories of the day that SNL, would have had very high up in the show. And they just nailed it.
Yeah, that was so good. If those events had happened, I think in maybe season 20, like towards the end of the Sandler and Farley years, I don't know that I would trust them to handle it so well and with such clever takes behind it. I think it would have been real heavy-handed if they even touched on it at all. And to me, I think I'm just so thankful that we have people like Ana Gasteyer who were on the cast to take on some of this material and some of these people in the news and in pop culture, like she did and like the rest of the cast did. I think it's for the better. I mean, that transition from the mid 90s to like Ana Gasteyer, Will Ferrell and them, I think it was a transition that was so much for the better. Like basically she was part of a cast that saved the show essentially.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as you said, that was one of the years that they were really looking at ending it and feeling it had run its course. And that really, like you said, it kind of got them back to tighter sketches. You had said it had become a boys' club. It had become kind of, a little raunchier maybe, whereas the Ana Gasteyer era of SNL got it back to what I would say was, I mean, in some ways cleaner. There was still a lot of great like innuendo and, we talked about Martha Stewart topless. Like there were great moments like that pushed the envelope, but in a way that I think was just smarter. It was more intelligent and higher level. So if there was innuendo, if there was some crassness to any of it, it was definitely done in a way more intelligent way. And I mean, I think that was a period of time where in those subsequent years you saw Tina Fey come in and new writers, and a female writer. And I mean, Paula Pell had been there, like you said. And so you did have a lot of great females behind the camera as well, that were starting to craft some of this stuff. But, maybe it was those women who really had an influence on how the show's direction started to change. And I think those actors that they had at that time were a lot of them were from the Groundlings.
Yeah.
Which I think
Anna's a groundling.
Yeah. Anna was a groundling, and Sherry O'Terry, Will Ferrell, I think Chris Kattan. Some of them were from that style where I know it was very characters really important. So they had great characters they could do. Sketch writing was really important, crafting these really good sketches. And so the show just kind of got tighter again, to the point where you have these characters that are breaking out and people are, dressing up as the cheerleaders for Halloween or doing SNL became sort of that cultural touchstone again, that it has been at times in its history, but not all times. And that was definitely a time. I mean, my late years of high school was a time when everyone I knew some of those sketches from SNL. They knew the cheerleaders, they knew the delicious dish, they knew the NPR characters, they knew Molly Shannon as Mary Catherine Gallagher. I mean, everyone knew what was going on SNL.
And an interesting tidbit too that I found was that when Colin Quinn was leaving Weekend Update, Ana Gasteyer and Chris Parnell actually auditioned to be the new co-anchors on Weekend Update. Tina and Jimmy ultimately got the jobs, but Ana and Chris Parnell actually auditioned. So we almost lived in a world in which Ana Gasteyer was a Weekend Update anchor. I think that would have been pretty natural fit. Could you see Ana doing that?
Yes, I think her and Chris Parnell both, I think together would have been a great team on that. He's kind of similar in that he committed, a lot of dry characters, a lot of straight-faced in some ways, but kind of zany underneath. And the newscaster worked really well for that because they had to be serious facing a little bit, but with just this ridiculousness to it all. I think that would have been awesome. It's too bad we can't have an alternate world where we saw what that would have looked like, but
they should release the tapes. SNL, release the audition tapes. We need to see them. I would love to see that.
Yes, yeah, that would have been awesome. But Ana Gasteyer, I was, it's unfortunate. I've not seen her subsequent work as much. I know, of course, she was in Mean Girls, the movie, and was funny in that. She did a lot of she really did a lot of just mom roles, the wife in scenes. I mean, SNL has always had the people they had to turn to be the straight man or the mom, the dad, those characters. And so if you could stand out in those, I felt like that showed some real talent, and she always did. She always, she has a unique look to some extent. I was looking at how old she was when she was on the show, and I think she wouldn't have even been 30 yet when she started, and so early 30s for those years. And I'm thinking, wow, I mean, she could play this range. I think she always seemed maybe a little older than she was, and just could play those roles so well. There actually another sketch I really enjoyed rewatching that I remembered was this. It's called The Dysfunctional Family. Was it Sarah Michelle Gellar who was
Sarah Michelle Gellar?
Okay, yeah. And Will Ferrell just gets just so angry. Will you stop interrupting? And they're eating really loud with their forks.
She's the perfect mom in that too.
And she is.
Did you pick up my dry cleaning?
It's not ready until Thursday.
I thought you said it'd be ready today.
No, it's going to be ready Thursday.
Well, I have that meeting tomorrow.
Well, I'm sorry.
I wish you weren't a liar.
I didn't lie, Ted.
I just wish you weren't a liar.
I wish you wouldn't call me a liar.
Don't raise your voice at me.
I am not raising my voice.
You do not talk to me like that. You don't talk to me like that. I work too hard to deal with this stuff. I work too hard. I am a division manager in charge of 29 people. I drive a Dodge Stratus.
It's hilarious. It just, Will Ferrell alone though couldn't have carried it. It had, it was her reaction and that made it such a perfect sketch because she again didn't break character, held her own against Will Ferrell, a giant, and then the two of them together, they're just so funny because she is kind of apologizing and then finally it kind of all hell breaks loose. But I mean, it's just so funny. It was just such a perfect example of those sketches that I loved during that time that were really just kind of, it's three people at a dinner table.
Yeah, slice of life.
Those are some of my favorites when you get the one character who's over the top, the others have to, and if they keep it together, I mean, that is just as funny in some ways as when you get to see the few where they kind of crack up. But I love I love just thinking like, how hard would it be to be in a room with Will Ferrell becoming unhinged at the dinner table and not just start laughing and that
What a pro.
that was a really fun one to watch. I just so kind of back to what where I was going with that was she's played some. I know she's been in some roles since, and I think even a show. I do remember that about auto
American Auto.
sales. American Auto, yeah.
Yeah, I watched a few episodes.
Yeah.
It was pretty funny. I don't know. I just got so busy. But I would like to go back to it. But it had a lot of promise from what I saw.
Okay, I'll have to check that out because I've every time that I've seen her in an interview since any SNL reunions, things like that, she's awesome. I think she is so funny and I noticed as I was rewatching Seinfeld recently, as I told you, I was watching the old 90s. I'm really into the 90s nostalgia right now. She was in the Snoop Nazi episode.
Yeah. I had forgotten that too.
I recently, hey, that's Anna Gasteier, yeah.
Yeah, I recently rewatched the Soup Nazi episode for another project that I'm working on. But like, yeah, I was like the Leonardo DiCaprio meme from Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, pointing at the TV like Anna Gasteier. There she is. Yeah, that was a fun little treat.
It is. She's so just kind of probably the career beginnings, getting a little guest spot on that, getting kicked out of the restaurant by the Soup Nazi, and and so that it's I think she's had some success since the show, and I'm glad for it, and I would love to see her more. I would love to see her and Sherry O'Terry and Molly Shannon reunited somehow.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah, that would be so much fun. We see Molly Shannon here and there. Sherry O'Terry's been off the radar quite a bit over the years, but that would be so much fun to see them back. Anna came back for the Betty White episode to do Delicious Dish. I thought that was great.
Yes, I do. I know, and I've loved it when they brought back the old sketches like that in recent years. That's fun. That's all. Honestly, that's still one of my favorite things now. Watching SNL is when they bring back someone older. I'm really glad people from all eras still come back on the show and that they'll reprise their old characters that we all remember when they do come back on.
Yeah, I love that too. So now's the point in the show where you kind of summarize as the guest, just a little summary, convincing voters as to why they should consider voting for Ana Gasteier for the SNL Hall of Fame.
I think a lot of it has to do with what we talked about with being a groundbreaking female cast member coming onto the show after a decade or more of male-dominated stars on the show and sketches that usually were centered around maybe the male lead character, where the women were often supporting players. And so for that reason alone, I mean, just being part of just really, when you look at the main cast list from that era, it was those three that we've talked about, Ana Gasteyer, Sherry O'Terry, and Molly Shannon, who were the three female main players on the show before they started really increasing some of those numbers later on. But it's just wild to think. I mean, it was just three of them that were in that main cast. And so I feel like she was part of an era that redefined SNL again, that brought back character-driven comedy that relied on the actors on the show to really come up with these memorable characters that appeared time and time again, that you could reliably create a new Delicious Dish sketch or a Martha Stewart sketch. And you always, in a season and multiple times a year, you could have a great, memorable sketch featuring one of Ana Gasteier's characters. She did it all. I mean, she could play the straight woman to Will Ferrell's zany male character, but she always stood her own ground against that and never disappeared in any sketch that I remember. I mean, she just with her unique voice, her unique look, and style. I feel like she always stood out in a sketch. I do think, now as I look back on the history of women on SNL, not all of them would make the Hall of Fame. There are a lot of them, and really, because there haven't been, as many women on the show as there have been men, a lot of them I feel like I'd say, oh, all these women were great, because there are fewer numbers of them. I tend to remember most of them pretty well, but not all of them would make the Hall of Fame. I think in recent years, you certainly saw the eras where Kate McKinnon and Adie Bryant and Cecily Strong took over again as like the reasons to watch the show. And you had Kristen Wiig, and you've had and Tina Fey and Amy Poehler. And so you had those times in history where a female was one of the main reasons you were going to watch SNL. And I really feel like Ana Gasteyer was one of those reasons to watch. In the 90s, you had Ana Gasteyer, Molly Shannon, and Sherry O'Terry. I feel like they deserve their spot in SNL history, and Ana Gasteyer certainly deserves her spot in SNL's Hall of Fame for being a groundbreaking comedian.
So there's that. Thank you so much to our guest, Nicole Brady, and many thanks to Thomas for a wonderful conversation about the great Ana Gasteyer. I'm not sure where I lean on Gasteyer. I don't think she belongs on a first ballot. I don't think she does. I feel like she's got to earn her way in. A little more time is needed. But let's listen to her sketch. This is Anna playing one of her most familiar characters, Martha Stewart. And Joan Allen is playing Martha Stewart's mother in this Thanksgiving special. Let's go to it now.
Tomorrow on Martha Stewart Living.
I'm Martha Stewart. Thanksgiving. It's not just a day for turkey and dressing. This traditional American holiday commemorates the autumn feast when our pilgrim forefathers and the nearby savages put an end to their vicious fighting. In keeping with that tradition, I'll be joined tomorrow on Living by my mother.
Get your bangs out of your eyes.
We'll reveal some of the Stewart family's time-honored Turkey Day secrets.
The hell we will.
Cool it. Mother will share her famous recipe for twice-baked sweet potatoes.
Simple, fresh ingredients are the only secret to this classic side dish.
Although balsamic vinegar would be a delightful modern addition.
Don't be ridiculous, that's acidine.
I just thought that maybe...
I know what I'm doing.
Well, why don't you, Mother, please don't...
Please.
The table setting is a wonderful opportunity to marry family tradition with personal style. I've offset my grandmother's stoneware with miniature gourds and these luxurious Moroccan textiles.
Your grandmother hated Moroccans.
We'll also relate some of our favorite Thanksgiving memories. I'll never forget the year it snowed.
It never snowed on Thanksgiving.
Yes, it did. It's a childhood memory I really cherish.
Well, it never happened.
Are you calling me a liar?
We will not do this here, Martha. Simmer down.
Of course, no Thanksgiving would be complete without taking a moment to recall a few things for which we are grateful. I give thanks for Forsythia, Beefeater's Gin, and caller ID. Mother?
I give thanks for Talbot's, Beefeater's Gin, and my flawless memory.
It did snow, Mother.
Martha, it didn't.
It was the same Thanksgiving you fired Maisie for feeding giblets to the dogs.
Ah, yes, now I remember. You threw my gravy boat at me and broke my glasses.
I loved her like a mother. Join us tomorrow on Living.
Thanksgiving comes but once a year.
And that is a good thing. It did snow.
No, it did not.
I can't...
That was great. Definitely, again, one of her more famous characters, Martha Stewart, and you can see why. She just does a fantastic job with the role, and there's some great jokes in there too. So maybe that seals the deal for you. Doesn't quite seal the deal for me, but that's just me. You might be thinking something completely different. Maybe you're in Nicole's camp and you think she belongs in right away. This is your prerogative. This is a democracy at work. You get to cast your vote when voting opens. So do that. And please, on your way out, as you pass the weekend update exhibit, turn out the lights on the wall, because the SNL Hall of Fame is now closed.
Thanks for listening to the SNL Hall of Fame podcast. Make sure to rate, review, share, and subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. Follow us on social media at SNLHOF. This is Doug Denant saying, see you next week.